Both of these gentlemen really don't need an introduction, but I'm gonna give you one anyway. Bob Roper is the senior policy advisor for the Western Fire Chiefs. He's been in the fire service for over 45 years, starting as a volunteer, rising to become fire chief of Ventura County, then the Nevada State Forester, and served on the National Wildland Fire Commission. Chief Dan Muncy is the fire chief of San Bernardino, which is the largest county in the United States. He's the president of the Metro Fire Chiefs Association. He's on the board of FireScope and past president of the International Association of Fire Chiefs. So we really have two leaders here that are thought leaders in firefighting and where we've been and where we're going in the future. So the panel's called the Future of Firefighting. And before we look forward, I actually want to look back. But before we do that, just a little disclaimer, both of these gentlemen have agreed to speak as themselves with their own opinions, not in official capacity. So they're expressing personal opinions, in some roles that obviously have much larger policy positions and implications. So looking back, Dan, maybe we'll start with you. Over the last 5 to 10 years, what are some significant changes you've seen in the fire service?
Thank you, and those of you that know me know that I don't have any problem expressing my own personal beliefs.
We're counting on that, in fact.
Yeah, let's go back to when I started in the early '90s. We had a land mobile radio, VHF. We had shovels. Of course, we had the Type 3 brush engines we can call for aircraft. We would arrive on a fire and listen to the report of conditions we were coming in, and somebody would invariably give us a paper map, and we would go to work. We'd be assigned to a division, and let's fast forward to today. What's really changed? And the answer is not a lot. And recently I testified in front of the Natural Resources. It was the Appropriations Subcommittee in Congress, and I explained to them that their U.S. wildfire agencies are the very best 1990s fire departments out there. They really are. You're welcome. I don't know if they were talking to me. But the point is that you're still using land mobile radios. You're still literally handing people paper maps. You're still having firefighters engage in a very dynamic fire situation, more dynamic than they were 30 years ago in the same manner. Why is it that we have the technology that we have? And I always love this. My wife doesn't, but I say my wife's been tracking me since 2009. But we don't track our federal firefighters. We don't track any of our firefighters. Why is it that we have smart devices on our wrists that can tell us our biometrics and literally call 911? We can't do that in the wildland arena. Why is it that we're using Waze to even get to these incidents? And certainly there's some great products, and I think Chief Fennessy was speaking earlier, and he created an incredible intel platform with Virus program. But that's still a snapshot. That literally is a manned aircraft that's giving us a short video. There's fire behavioral modeling based on that static snapshot. And then we're overlaying that into our operations. And in today's world, that's really not acceptable. So if we go back 9 to 10 years, I'll tell you, 9 to 10 years ago to 30 years ago, not much has changed. And incrementally, we're starting to make a difference today.
So you said something, you asked the question, why is that? Why haven't we been able to make faster progress over the last 10 years?
Well, culture is a huge part of this. Agency silos is another. The way we are budgeted, and I know there's a lot of tech leaders in this room. I don't think there's a good understanding from the tech leaders on municipal fire, state budgets, federal budgets, how we actually budget. We don't adopt technology to scale in our regions like we should. There's a lot of protection in our different agencies. And this fundamental belief that this is the way we do things, what got us here, we're just going to keep doing these things here. And I always tell our organization that what got us here will not get us there. If you don't understand, we are taking a butt whipping from some of these fires. We are literally killing our firefighters. Now there's articles that are in the press about the dangers of wildland smoke that we're putting our firefighters in every single day. Yet we're so slow to adopt these ideas that a lot of what we've done as humans now we can use robotics for. Now we should be using technologies. Let's keep the firefighters as safe as we can from preventing them from ever being exposed. But the mentality in the fire service is better PPE, better respirators. No, the answer is don't expose your firefighters unless you have to. Let's move forward with technology.
So Bob, as you look back over the last 5 to 10 years, what have you seen change?
Well, The big thing is that, as Michael Wara talked about earlier, the number of fires, the severity of fires, and the amount of damages that the fires is happening is exponentially grown in the last 15 years in our careers. When you look at where is the population settling in our country, it's in the WUI areas. And in the fire service, before the population was outside of those urban centers, when we had a wildfire, we used the term point protection, where perimeter control, where we would respond to the fire, put the perimeter around the fire, and maintain it. As the population increase has happened, we have more and more structures, whether it's in the inner mix or the interface. We have not grown the response organizations to the same proportion as the threat of the population growth into those areas. So now, when a fire happens, we are moving away from perimeter control when homes are threatened, lives are threatened, and we're having to deal with life safety and so forth. So ask yourself, are we as effective in our perimeter control, putting the fire out in the early stages as we were years ago due to population growth?
So I want to speak on that for a second. There's two things. First off, is that if you know me, you'll know that I don't think we have a wildfire crisis in the United States. I just don't think we have a wildfire crisis. We have a wildland management crisis. And what's changed over the last 30 years is we've gotten further and further and further away from naturally occurring fires and from some of those fuel mitigations that we could take when I was a younger firefighter versus what we do today. And when you can't manage that landscape because of bureaucracies, environmental concerns, lawsuits, then you're going to have more frequent and larger fires. The second to what Bob's saying is that we're in San Francisco. San Francisco had an earthquake, all the buildings were knocked down, huge fire burned the rest of San Francisco. San Francisco didn't come back and say, hey, let's build everything out of wood and straw again. Look around, it's all masonry. Go to Chicago where Mrs. O'Leary cow kicked over the lamp. It's all masonry. Go to Manhattan, it's all masonry. But in our wildland urban interface, Mike Wara's picture slide where they had the signs in their front yard that basically said, let my house burn. We're not adjusting as an industry to what we need to do to truly keep our communities safe.
Yeah, one thing that interests me there is just the intersection between housing policy, not just in the wildland, but broadly. If we aren't building enough housing here in San Francisco, people got to build it somewhere. And so where does this growth go? It goes to the WUI, and can it be done properly? Can it be insured? It's really all sort of connected, this broad housing issue, which is such an important issue in the economy. So maybe shifting gears to looking forward. Dan, what would you like to see?
One of the things that I think is really incredibly important is in the wildland environment, the management, suppression, there's a lot of silos. And the silos independently want to do a great job, but there's not a lot of coordination in those silos. There's a lot of bureaucracy. As I mentioned, there's a lot of lawsuits, and there's agency heads that have different views on how they should approach our wildfire problem, our wildland management. There needs to be better coordination, correlation with the vision of how we're going to keep our country safe. And as an example, in California, Governor Newsom did a great job issuing a couple of executive orders that are suspending CEQA to allow us to put good fire on the ground, which is great, suspending CEQA, except we have air quality management concerns that only allow us to burn 30 acres a day on certain days. Well, that's no good when you need to burn, in my jurisdiction, a couple thousand acres per year to ensure that we have a healthy watershed or healthy environment. So that's the kind of coordination that has to be improved. That's fundamentals. You can bring as much technology as you want to the problem, and technology that's left of bang is where I'm primarily interested. You know, how do we look at our return on investment? Where should we be working together on joint fuel maintenance and some fuel mitigation projects? We can do all that, we can plan it, but can we actually do that work? And so bringing these agencies together, I often ask the federal government, who's in charge? And that really needs to be solved.
Agreed. Bob, what would you like to see looking forward over the next 5 to 10 years? What changes do we need to make?
I think the number one is we need to start looking at the wildland fire problem for the year 2050 to 2070. Many of us won't be here then, but what we owe it to our profession and to society that we start looking that far out. And you ask why, and the real reason is if you look at the amount of time it takes change from a local, state to a federal level, if you don't start looking to the future, that change will never happen. You'll be behind the curve. We're constantly resolving tomorrow's issues. So think about this. Are we resolving with technology yesterday's issues, or are we embracing technology and dealing with the issues that happen in 2050? All projections are there'll be more wildfires, more destruction on a curve going into the future. If we start making change now, the intersection between our success and the escalation of the fires is still going to be out there for quite a ways before we start seeing a change of that curve. So that's why I think we owe it to ourselves, start looking and living toward the future as we embrace technology and all the operational practices.
So just to kind of dig a little bit into technology, we're sitting here in San Francisco, over the last 3 years, there's been a revolution in artificial intelligence. We're seeing it change big parts of the economy. There's a lot of, optimism, fear, and everything in between about where that's all going to go. Just specifically on AI, have you seen it in the fire service? Where do you think it'll be applied? I'd just be curious, Dan.
I saw it yesterday with the Seneca demonstration, fully autonomous copter, carries 100 pounds, and it's using artificial intelligence to not only sense that fire, to safely maneuver in a congested airspace, because there's other drones that are operating, other copters in the space, determining where that fire is, determining how to best attack this fire. And that's a very simple but great example of the use of artificial intelligence that we really see in robotics. That's the first place that I think that we're starting to see the big changes. The second is how we engage in making human decisions. And we worked with the Western Fire Chiefs Association and worked with some of the veteran incident commanders, operations folks, brought them all in the room and started cataloging how are they making decisions based on what they were seeing in front of them, and started training AI models to help the first responder. We use an approach called recognized decision making, meaning the slideshow of the past. What have we seen? Is this one similar? What actions did we take that work? Let's do this. But training AI to start augmenting those human decisions, getting left of bang, using AI that's constantly looking at our landscape. We've been working with the FAA to be able to fly persistent UAS, aircraft that never comes down, to look and model the fuel moistures and the different watersheds and weather conditions, and then to determine where should we be basing our actions today to prevent the wildfires from occurring. It does no good if we run thousands of wildfire behavioral models every day, but we don't take any actions to actually limit that, and that's a big area where AI is starting to expand. So this was 3 simple areas, but AI is truly bringing a lot of value to our firefighters. It's going to allow us to be more efficient, more safe, and more effective in doing our jobs.
Bob, how are you seeing AI in the fire service, and where do you think it's needed?
Well, I'll just elaborate on what Dan was saying. Is the Western Fire Chiefs received a grant from NASA where we've been working with the field practitioners on creating a digital twin of what an incident commander goes through on their thought process and so forth. Right now, what we're seeing is there's a lot of, we call early detection devices and this and that, but they're not interoperable. They're not built on necessarily a common operating platform, and they don't have standard data. During the Wildfire Commission, one of the things that was recognized is we need data standards. We need to know how to share that data, because some of the AI that we identified in the decision support framework is missing gaps of holes on the data that's needed. We've identified it, but we don't have the data fields out there. So AI is good only to a certain point, but it's also identified we as an industry need to backfill those data sets that are missing.
Yeah, so I think we can all agree there hasn't been enough change. There's a very bright, promising future. There's things we need to do to actually make that future happen. So maybe Bob, going to you, what are the enabling conditions that we have to create, or what do we need to do to actually affect this future? What are the changes we need to make?
Well, we talked about, number one, look toward the future, and really what we need to get the message out to society is we need to invest up front into the future for decision models, all the efforts that we do, so that they understand at the end of the road, under the recovery, those costs will be much lower. I think that's a critical point where we are looking into the future for all politicians to know that response is not the end all. It's a complete resiliency program that needs to have that heavy involvement up front to deflect what the long-term costs are.
Dan, what do you think we need to change to make that future happen?
You know, I'm so grateful for Dr. Lori Morrell, who I want to point out, Dr. Morrell, as I went backstage, she said, you were in the front row taking notes when I was speaking, and she's in the very back right now. But she did something very, very important as our U.S. Fire Administrator, which is creating a system called NARIS. That's going to allow us to collect information better and share that information. And then in conjunction with that, the Western Fire Chiefs Association has been working on a public safety cloud that allows us to bring in the data points. So I often speak on smart cities, and you'll be sitting in front of city managers, and I'll say, how many of you have heard of smart cities? And everybody raise their hand, and I'll say, name one. And we've been talking about smart cities for 15 years, and they can't even name one. And the reason is, in a smart city environment or in our fire environment, we have silos of data. And we're not taking this data and we're not creating the data governance, as Bob was talking about, to actualize this data. And so the Western is building this cloud environment that will allow us to take large data sets, definitive data sets, and then start building this model for AI. So this is really exciting as we move forward on the tech front, because what we want to do, and I'm going to use my iPhone again, is that I can push back from Oakland because I'm too cheap to fly into San Francisco. But as I'm pushing back from Oakland, that was a joke and it was funny, okay? As I'm pushing back from Oakland, I can take on my phone and I can download E-Trade. Okay, as I'm pushing back from the gate, and as we're taxiing, I can download all my banking information. Before I get in the air, I can be making trades on E-Trade. But any technology in the fire service, one of the frustrations is often how long it takes, how much it costs in the project management. We need to take our data and create that app store for the future.
One of the things I just find inspiring is that we've got two leaders of the fire community here talking fluently about data governance frameworks, artificial intelligence, drones, common operating pictures. I mean, these are, I feel like that is a real testament to the technology fluency that's grown in this industry, and I think that's like really key part of this. And even just from 5 years ago to now, seeing that embrace, I think it's been a massive change, and I think is one of those conditions. Bob, what apprehensions do you have? There's change in the air. What are you scared of?
Probably three things as we talk about technology is how do we adapt the technology for the end user? How do we create technology that is cost effective so it can actually be used? Because if we can't do it, what good is it? The other part of the apprehension is just as we talk later today, there's a session on the president's executive order. And I'm an optimist. And I have to tell you that it's a once-in-a-chance lifetime opportunity to where you're actually seeing the possibility of federal fire agencies all coming under one umbrella. My biggest apprehension is this going to happen? Or could it end up being what happened in the Department of Interior with the Office of Wildland Fire, where you had an issue with your fire agency, so you created OWF, but they didn't get along, so nothing happened. So are we taking and restructuring, shuffling the cards, but all the deck chairs are in the same spot? That's probably my biggest apprehension looking at that in the future.
Dan, over to you.
Absolutely. So I mentioned that we don't want to be the very best 1990s wildland fire service anymore. We need to be the 2030 today. CAL FIRE is doing an amazing job at what they've done with their innovation, but they're leaving their federal partners way behind. And so I agree with Bob that the U.S. Wildfire Service is critical first step, getting the right person to lead that organization, fully supporting that organization, but then working with our elected officials to break down the barriers to do the next step, which is to bring agriculture into this mix. And then the third step is really focus on getting them the budget, the agility that they need, not the waterfall approach and the bureaucracy approach of federal government, but the agility they need to very quickly adopt tech, to get it to the hands of the firefighters from day one so they have a culture of innovation, a culture of what got us here isn't going to do us there, a culture where they can actually have the situational awareness that they need to keep the firefighters safe, that they can effectively respond. That is the biggest challenge that we're facing today. There's a lot of people working on that. And I know that everybody in this room has a piece in ensuring that that is successful so that we don't get to the condition where we have that Office of Wildfire that was just good enough, let's just do this to create some appeasement. And in the end, we still have the very best 1990s fire department. Our communities deserve more.
Absolutely. So I think culture nails it, and gatherings like this are opportunities to shift the culture. So thank you to both of you so much for your leadership, your time, your commentaries. We really appreciate it. Thanks very much.